A warm welcome to everyone to Paperback Sports, where today we'll be looking at the first round recaps of the FIDE Candidates 2024, a game between Gukesh and Vidit Gujrathi, having the white and black pieces respectively. Now, these two Indian players have their first foray into the candidates this year. Um, Without further ado, let's look at this thrilling clash. The stage is set, the pieces are in position, and the tension is palpable. Let the battle begin. So, this game starts off with one d4 by one d5, c4, and e6. And this is a very standard Queen's Gambit decline. Knight to c3 and c5, this is the Tarrasch defense. With e3, knight to f6, knight to f3, knight to c6, a3, and a6. Now, if you notice something about this position, is that there's a lot of symmetry between the two sides. So white decides to take matters into his own hands to break the symmetry, to get something from the position. He goes with d takes on c5, and Vidit replies with bishop takes c5, with b4 pushing the bishop away, and here Vidit has a decision to make. Now, bishop to a7 is okay, bishop to e7 is fine as well, and bishop to d6 is, of course, very possible. And he chooses bishop to d6. It's a very sound option. Here we have the first surprise of the candidates and the first surprise of the game, really, with rook to a2. And there's only a handful of games that reach this position in the Masters database, and only one that has players about the 2700 level, and it's between Vladimir Fedoseev and Nihal Sarin during the Serbia Chess Open in 2021. With rook to a2, and the game followed with castles. It followed with castles, and then rook to d2, and then queen to e7. But there's also a very special line here, where black can sacrifice a knight. Knight takes on b4. Now, this looks crazy, right? There's no, it doesn't look like there's much counterplay from here, and no sane human being would play knight takes on b4. But what if you go for it? Knight takes on b4, sorry about that. Knight takes on b4, a takes on b4, bishop takes, and queen to b3, kicking away the bishop. And you take, queen takes, and now black has only one move for him to stay in the game, and that is knight to e4, forking both the queen and the rook. And computer think this is completely even, which is quite interesting because white will be down in exchange. But engines are way superior, so what do we know? Anyways, back to the game. So here Vidit plays knight to e5 after rook a2, and Gukesh goes for rook to d2, which seems to be the main idea of this preparation. And here, there's been games that played castling is fine. There's one game where queen to c7 is played between Sambuev and Bacalao Alonso from Cuba in 2021. But here Vidit plays knight takes on f3 with check, and Gukesh plays g takes on f3. He can play queen takes on f3, but here it could be prep, it could be something. He plays g takes on f3, opening up the g file, attacking the weaker g7 pawn. So after g takes on f3, it's very standard development. Black castles, bishop to b2, a5, and c takes on d5, with e5 being played. And here Gukesh plays knight to b5. And here in the interview after the game, Vidit said that he expected a different line because he feels that black has the initiative after 14 knight to b5. He mentioned a line. He claimed that he felt Gukesh should have played b takes on a5 first, and then bishop to d7, knight to b5, bishop takes on b5, bishop takes on b5, and queen takes on a5. He claims that this was better for white. He was expecting this line, but he didn't get it. He got knight b5 instead. And the engine is completely okay with this move, and so the game goes on. A takes on b5, knight takes on d6, the knight for a bishop, queen takes on d6, a takes b4, queen takes b4, and here we have queen c2. Now this is where the game gets interesting, because if you notice in this position, the e5 pawn is hanging. Nothing is defending it, and actually the engine recommends taking the pawn. But what I found out as I was doing preparations for this video is that with bishop takes on e5, you allow a nasty idea of sacking the knight on e4, and it attacks the pinned rook on d2, pinned to the king, of course. And if you don't take the knight, you hang the rook. At least you lose an exchange, right? So white takes the knight, queen takes, and you see that the rook is under attack. The rook on h1 is under attack now, and there's no good way to save it. So the only way here for white is to take the pawn on g7, attacking the black's rook. And queen takes on h1. You cannot take the rook yet for white, which is surprising because wasn't it the entire idea of this taking on g7? So when you see bishop takes on f8, basically white can resign. And why is that? Because after bishop to h3, you go pile on pressure on the pinned bishop to the king. And here, what can white really do? You can do rook b2, I guess. Right? After rook b2, going for the softer b7 pawn, you just have rook a1 and the queen is lost. Queen takes on a1, queen takes on f1 with check, king d2, and you lose the queen. So here, black is completely winning. And so yeah, I thought this idea was very interesting to show. Of course, they didn't mention this idea in the press conference. But I did think that this was pretty special because I was wondering why didn't they take the pawn, because it looked completely fine. But in this case, queen c2 was played, and now there's no more knight e4 ideas. One can dream, but it's not happening. And here, Vidit unleashes a very interesting move that Gukesh did not expect. He did take 40 minutes on this move, and in the press conference he said that he spent 15 minutes looking at the move and 25 minutes resisting the urge to play. So we are not alone when we want to sacrifice material, even the top GMs want to. And so here, Vidit played bishop to g4. Now, this move looks interesting, right? Okay, you attack the pawn, but the pawn can take the bishop, no? So here's where the magic happens. If the pawn takes the bishop, you face rook f to c8, hitting the queen. Queen to d3 is the only square for the queen. Knight to e4, hitting the pinned rook, as we mentioned just now. Here, let's say you play f3, kicking away the knight. You take the rook, queen takes, and you avoid the queen trade. Even trading queens is fine, but let's say you are more damaged, avoid the queen trade. And what can white really do here? Bishop to d3, push the pawn. You could bring the bishop out, you know, that could be fine. And what do you do? After rook a2, you know, you can resign. What else can white really do here? Castling, you know, you're basically down material, and you just have a worse position at this point. So here, bishop to g4 is an idea to secure the draw. Because what happens after bishop g4 is that obviously we just said you cannot take the bishop. So Gukesh finds the only move, which is to hit the queen with tempo with bishop to c3. Now you might be asking, why not play queen to c4? Because queen takes on c4, bishop takes, and bishop takes to f3. First you drop a pawn, and you know, what do you play here? Castling, knight to e4, hitting the rook, you know, rook to c2, running away, knight to g5. Here there's a really nice threat coming with h4, bishop to e4, hitting the rook. And here, if you still decide to run away, you face a lot of problems. Let's say you got the rook to c3, you face knight to f3 check, and if you notice, no matter where the king goes, there's only two legal moves, and both are on like squares. So this lands into discovered check. So let's say king to g2, knight to d2 check, and let's say f3. You can play knight to c4. Knight takes on c4. And here, if the bishop is taken, let's say white takes the bishop, you can see that the knight can just take the rook unopposed. There's no problems here. And let's say white takes the rook, you get skewered by the bishop, skewering both the rooks. So yeah, it's very comfortable for black to play, because it will just end up with one rook and one minor piece versus two rooks. So it should be comfortable for a GM to clear that endgame. back to the current position, bishop to c3, kicking away the queen, and so queen to a3, bishop to b2, and they just shuffle their pieces back and forth. And this is a 3-4 repetition for the first round of the FIDE candidates. Now, of course, if we were going to look at chess games just purely by the result, we will think that chess is boring. But, of course, those that watch chess for what it actually is, we know that it isn't boring, and that there are fireworks such as bishop to g3, which, ironically enough, the computer gives as an inaccuracy, because Gukesh actually highlighted a line of a rook to e8. Let's show that line. Rook to e8, he suggested in the press conference as the strongest move. And here I think he suggested queen to c4. And after queen to c4, Gukesh said he expects queen to d6. And honestly, this position is pretty even. The computer gives minus 0.4, which is pretty minute. And yeah, so that's how the game ends. The game ends in a peaceful draw, if peaceful can be used in this game at all. One of the funny things is after bishop to g4, when it was played, and they were looking at one of the lines of f takes on g4, rook f to c8, queen to d3. Here, both players so far were in agreement that this was the strongest response to the blundering, so-called blundering by taking the free bishop, the sacrificed bishop. Here, Vidit did suggest knight to e4, which was the line that we showed just now, but Gukesh did suggest rook to a2. And, well, this speaks to the top players' ability, because both of them mentioned the top two engine lines. These were knight e4 was the top engine move, and rook to a2 was second best. So with that in mind, we've come to the end of the first ever recap on Paperback Sports. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed recording it very much. Uh, do leave comments, advice on how you want this recap style to be. I'll be more than happy to take upon of your advice, your helpful advice, uh, where possible, to make this more enjoyable for you and to keep it fun for me. And yeah, well, with that said, see ya.